Hello and welcome to another episode of the Know Your Compliance podcast. I am super excited today to be talking with Joni Brennan from DIACC. And now, Joni is the president of DIACC, and I keep using the acronym. DIACC is the Digital Identity and Authentication Council of Canada. Joni leads the national efforts to advance digital trust in Canada. We're going to talk about what that really means. And she brings to that role an deep expertise of 20 years experience in digital identity with public-private collaborations, technology. And Joni's a known speaker on this stuff. In her role as DIACC, she's frequently asked to talk about digital identity. So I'm really happy to welcome you to the show, Joni. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thanks so much for the invitation, and I appreciate the opportunity to share through the podcast. Thank you.
So let's start. Most of our listeners will have some idea of what digital ID is and some variant of what authentication is. But let's start with like a really kind of at the beginning. What is digital trust? What is digital identity? Where does this all play in the world, and why is it important broadly, I suppose?
Great. So, we've stumbled right into one of the most challenging spaces here, which is defining definitions. Yep. It's always a fun game, and a continual game sometimes. So digital trust is really the collection of tools and capabilities that help people and organizations to have confidence in the digital interactions that they're having. So that's pretty broad. Mm-hmm. And what I like about the term digital trust is that for me at least, it's actually kind of more of an outcome. It's like an envisioned state that people acting on behalf of organizations are using different capabilities that are giving them confidence that it's going to be the same pattern, it's going to be the same things that they expect. And that it's going to be the same things that they expect in terms of those transactions that they're having. So something out of the wild isn't going to happen that they didn't know. So that's digital trust. Digital identity is really a suite of capabilities for how people and organizations authenticate who they are, that they should have access to certain materials, to certain resources. They're representations of presenting who we are. And I think that the definition of digital identity, it really is challenging. It's confusing to a lot of people. It can mean a lot of different things. If we're talking to people in the industry in this space, then I would say that, digital identity is something that we know because we're thinking about things like authentication, credentials, authorization. Like, we in this industry know a lot of these terms as the things that we're talking about. But when we talk to people kind of on the other side, or we talk to people who aren't in this industry, when they hear the words digital identity, they might not know what to think at all, or they might be thinking something that it isn't. Or maybe occasionally they are thinking about the capabilities that we're talking about in this industry, in this space. So I think it's the definition of terms is something that is well worth visiting and revisiting as the context and as the spaces change. And I also believe that it's important for people who are in this industry, in the digital trust, in the digital identity and access management field, that we also have empathy for the listener on the other side and make sure that we're kind of translating things that make a lot of sense to us as professionals, as practitioners, that we're translating into a language that is impactful and helps the person on the other side to actually kind of understand what it is we're trying to get at. And that might not be the same language that we speak to each other using.
Totally. No, absolutely. I mean, I think what I heard you touch on there's we're going to go deeper on some of the misconceptions that people hear around digital identity, because that's its own can of worms that I think certainly relates to and is actually comes from some of that definitional problem that we're identifying, because digital identity is not one like clean sentence, and can mean all sorts of things, it sometimes gets skewed into this whole political narrative around big government and all the rest. And I do want to talk about that, not right away, but we'll get to that topic.
Yeah.
I think what I heard you say, which I think was really interesting, is that at core, the goal of digital identity authentication, DIACC in general, is ensuring trust in all sorts of digital processes. And I think that to me is, I think there's nobody who argues with that. But that is also super important for us to get right, because I believe it unlocks a bunch of innovation for our country and for our society as we do that properly. Does that align with your view of this? Is that where you think this ultimately leads us to if we can do this properly, or is it, am I oversimplifying or undersimplifying?
No, I think that you put your finger right onto it. And here's what I mean. Even when I started, when I had the honor of being a part of the DIACC, this organization, the Digital ID and Authentication Council of Canada, the organization formed in 2012. I joined it in 2015. And for me, I was kind of like, well, it's an interesting name. Why is it Digital ID and Authentication? And kind of how did that come to be? And I always kind of felt like, well, there's so many more things. Like, why didn't we talk about credentials, or why didn't we talk about? So if you kind of put your scramble brain to the side of those questions, I think it gets at some of what I was thinking in like looking at the name of the organization, but also what is becoming more and more and more apparent over time. And I'll speak only for me, because I think probably other people have seen this long ago. But I think the operating word there that's doing a lot of lifting is authentication. And I actually think the operating word that's underneath that is authenticity. Now, we in the identity and access management space, we talk about verification, validation, identity proofing. We have all these terms that we use for what we're doing on, is Greg really Greg? Is this the Greg I think it is? That said, the whole of the when you take the camera angle very far back and you widen the lens, really the whole focus is on how can we, whoever we is, how can we determine that something is authentic, that this really is that person who they claim to be, that it really is this company that's reaching out to me that I supposedly have an account with, but even more so, is that picture really that picture? Has that picture been tampered with? Is that voice the actual voice of the person that we think it is? And so you can kind of draw that, confirming, validating, verifying authenticity. What is authentic? That is the underlying. Now, so I now really see the work that we collectively do as a personal identity. Personal identity is a subset underneath. Is this thing authentic? Is this person authentic? So they're basically very, very similar patterns. Of course, people have rights and have expectations more so than things do. But that said, it's really the same set of patterns. And for people, right, we have privacy, we have other things that apply, but the patterns are very, very similar depending on what the subject is that we're trying to confirm the authenticity of. So yes, I think that you nailed it. It's like quite a lot of places these patterns come into play.
Yeah, and I think that's what draws me to the field, and that's what I find interesting. In fact, is that it requires thoughtfulness around what you're trying to get to. Is to me anyhow, like if you're trying to confirm the identity of the other person on the other end of a Zoom call, there's a set of things you might do, but then there's a set of workarounds that you might do to overcome that, and then there's a set of things you might do to prevent those, and it kind of becomes a game of escalation. But I find that whole that's a very creative process, in fact, to go and think your way through that, and then layer in appropriate steps to authenticate ultimately. But done properly, and this to me is the exciting piece of the whole thing, is the better we all get at it as an industry, the more we're able to do things quickly with confidence, and at high value transactions with confidence quickly. That's pretty compelling. To not have to go in and meet a lawyer to transfer title 20 years ago would have been unheard of. We're getting there in some jurisdictions. There's some problems, but we're moving towards it. And I think, just to use that my world example, I think that would be really interesting. So, when we were talking, actually, why don't we go to what digital identity is not? Because I think that there's a common, I don't know, but there's certainly been some pushback against digital identity, and it comes in the form of it's a government way of tracking everybody. It's going to lead to a complete elimination of privacy. These are some of the knocks that we frequently hear, and in fact, there's been pushback in some provinces as we try and roll this out around that. Can you kind of speak to steelman that argument for a second if you could, but at the very least kind of push back against why that's not really the goal of all of this, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I would say in general, I'm the kind of person who typically does not deal in absolutes, like something absolutely is something or something absolutely is not something. Yes, occasionally absolutes are important, but that said, there is a lot of room on interpretation, and I would say that the handle or the phrase digital ID has become tangled in a shorthand of, for some, conjuring surveillance, conjuring the panopticon, the dystopia, a world of significant surveillance. So that handle, digital ID, has got wrapped into the grand interwoven conspiracy theory ecosystem of all conspiracy theories, which if you go deep enough, eventually they all connect into each other somehow. But that said, every great conspiracy theory has some kind of element of truth to it. And in fact, the reason that I've been focused on the topic of identity and identity and access management and everything that goes around it, I personally have stayed in this industry because I'm motivated to protect people, to care for people, to help people. So, and I am also very, very skeptical, meaning that I am motivated as a person for the privacy enhancement, for the privacy protection. So, I think that's an important feature set, is just recognizing that there is an element that tools. Again, digital ID is kind of one phrase. It could mean a whole lot of things. Like any tool can be, tools are crafted often for a purpose. They can be extended and used for purposes you never even imagined. Some of those purposes could be, extra benefit purposes. Some of them could be terrible. Now it's become a weapon, and we didn't kind of realize that and predict that in the beginning. So like any innovation, as you innovate, it's also important that guardrails are put in place on those innovations to codify and to stop and to protect and to mitigate any kinds of risks. Will the ecosystem, people, stakeholders always capture every risk immediately? Most likely not. That doesn't mean don't try. It means you have to set some guidance and some guardrails. And, I think it's a French philosopher, Paul Coelho, but who said, when you invent the steamship, you have to invent the lighthouse, something like that. Basically,
Yeah.
the ship was a great advancement. They were crashing into coasts, and then they said, "Oh, maybe we should put
Oops.
a light here and show
Yeah.
people that the coast is there." So you have to, as with any innovation, it can come with good and it can come with bad, and you need those guardrails to stop the bad from happening. Now, I will also say, though, at the same time, and this is me speaking personally, my own experience, I'm surveilled all the time, every day. I don't like it. I don't want it, and this is more of the marketing, the let's face it, the internet was built on advertising and marketing, and that ecosystem has focused on other sets of priorities that has created a feeling of a reality of things like cookies being tracked all over the internet, so we already live in this kind of ecosystem. And collectively, myself, organizations like DIACC, the members that were here, everyone that I interact is trying to bring parity, is trying to bring put people in the center, their wants, their desires, their benefits, which is actually not what we have today. So we're trying to move from a ecosystem that sucks up a lot of information, undo so about people already, and create a more empowered ecosystem that enables people to share and prove who they are in a more trustworthy and privacy respecting way. So I do think that we have to recognize that element of truth, that these tools can be used for nefarious reasons, which means all the more reason to collaborate on the guidance, on the guardrails, on how we collectively empower people with tools like credentials, or make sure that innovations like technology that does document comparison and document analysis, like is this a government issued ID? Does it show anything for counterfeit? We want to make sure that those tools are developed with the highest standard of requirements that are protecting people, reducing risks, and mitigating liabilities all the way through.
No, interesting. It's I kind of chuckle to myself as I think about how the internet has taken away our surveillance rights, or sorry, our privacy rights. When I think, pretty much every website I open right now, I'm trying to sell. They're trying to sell me something around softball, because it's softball season. My kids are in softball all the time, and somehow the internet knows that. And so those cookies very much are real, and you're absolutely correct. I think.
Well, and the funny thing there, I'm sorry, I have to say, the funny thing with that I always laugh at is, you're already in softball. You're already doing softball. Yeah. You don't need more softball. I've seen this like with industry conferences where you're a speaker on the agenda, you're going to the conference, and now your whole ecosystem is filled with advertisements for the conference that you're already going to. It's like, it's not working.
Yeah. This is too late, guys. I've already spent the money. You should be focused on the next thing. But anyhow, let's not make that thing better just yet. They can continue
there we go.
to market the wrong way. One of the things you said there cued me to thinking about good or implementations that have gone well or not well. And so we're in the process right now of integrating the BC Services Card into our remote ID verification, because the BC Services Card, as best as I can tell, has been a pretty good implementation of one form of digital authentication. Can you speak I mean, maybe you can't, I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but can you speak to why BC Services or Alberta has done also a decent job, why those have gone better than, say, Ontario or Saskatchewan, and what the important guardrails happen there, or what that looks like,
Yeah, I would be careful on commenting on any particular jurisdiction issues, but I would,
Sure.
but I would say that, in transparency, as somebody who's based in British Columbia, I'm a pretty big fan of the approach and the developments in our ecosystem. I think that the way the BC Service Card, you know that saying, it takes 10 years to make an overnight success. I think the BC Service Card is like a really good example of something like that. Meaning that the the movement started before, but I want to say like around 2006, and then kind of really got into play in 2009 on the service card, recognizing that it was a possibility that there were more care cards for health in BC than there were actual BC residents, and then it's something like, there shouldn't be that kind of mismatch, right? So how do we bring, whether that's a mistake or not, or who knows, but point being, there should be alignment there. And so, taking the pathway of looking at a real challenge, we've got health credentials, we've got driving credentials. In general, they should be aligned, but that we see some misalignment here. What can we governments do around that space, and how can we bring efficiencies, and how can we make this better for British Columbians? So kind of looking at that from that window, from that view, putting in place loads underneath the surface level of the water in terms of different ministries and departments working with each other, the driving, the service card, and even the thoughtful language that it's a service card. Our driver's license says service card on it. It doesn't say driver's license, or at least I think it doesn't. I should check. But the service card is a container for a driver's license credential, for a health credential, or any other credential potentially that you would want to have inside of that container. So the thoughtfulness, recognizing that you got to work with different departments, different authorities, driving being under ICBC, health being under health, service under services, and then doing that mindful work underneath the hood in government, and then creating a pathway for British Columbians to go on the cycle of the driver's license renewals. So, and I think it took a complete, don't quote me, but I think it was like a 5 to 7 year turnaround before everyone in the population went through that process of renewing their driver's license. And with that driver's license renewal, there was an in-person ceremony, and there was a question: do you want to combine? Do you want to put your health credential in this service card along with your driver's license? So you had a choice as a person. And then also, I say this basically memory, but there was a question, and because I'm in this industry, so I was kind of going through this when I got to BC, but there was also a question that said, do you consent to future services to be made available to you through this service card? And I'm the type of person, I said, yeah, please make these available to me. I'd love to see them. So all of that took cycles and cycles and work that might have been invisible. And quite often when I think about the pot of gold, if you will, like the real magic here, or one of the pieces of magic, it's that there is this verified, validated set of records for British Columbians. So we know who the British Columbians are. They have validated and verified themselves. Now it's like, what credentials can be hung off? How does that get into play? How does that work with the service card app? And how does that? So now it's like, how do you hook things on the plumbing for how that verified information can be used? I have seen how people can use that verified information for their needs. I have seen jurisdictions, sometimes there's a focus very heavily on the credential as the shiny object to deliver, or even a wallet as a shiny object to deliver. Certainly those are powerful and important tools in the space. I've also seen that if a jurisdiction is focused on the credential or the wallet, they may find down the line that, we need to know who the people are to attach those credentials to. So there's like a -3, -2, -1 to get to the digital ecosystem.
Right.
So I think that it's really one of the things with BC was the thoughtful time, the approach, it wasn't overnight, but having that validated database, having that validated set of records that you can then hang things off of, because I've seen it go in different orders, and that can be challenging. I also think that maybe back to the other question that you asked, like, people aren't clamoring for digital IDs, like people don't want that. I mean, at least not that I've heard or seen.
Yep.
And in fact, you know what? I don't even know that people really want driver's licenses. They want to drive. if they're what is it, 18, 19? If they're 19, they want to go into a bar.
Yep. Yeah.
So they know that this thing of a driver's license is that gateway, if you will, or that key. But they don't really, the driver's license isn't that exciting. It's all the things that the driver's license lets people do. So yeah, I think sometimes as well in jurisdictions or even in private sector, by putting this term or this phrase digital ID at the center, I think that can be confusing, because I don't think that's a thing people in general want or know they want, because that confusion as well. They want the, hey, can I get across the border faster? Can I get on that plane faster? Can I not drive to the lawyer's office to sign a contract? Like, all of those things are really the benefits to be promoted, along with the fighting of fraud and all those kinds of things. But digital ID as the center is not something that people are usually asking for. So.
Yeah, no, this is actually really helpful. For me, I think in terms of sales processes frequently. In my background, I used to be a realtor, still technically am, I suppose. But anyhow, and one of the things I often talked about was feature versus benefits. And when you talk to people about features, they don't care about features. You can say, well, I'm going to go do this marketing plan and have a sign on your lawn, do the open houses. And the home seller says, I don't care. All I want is my home sold. So if you approach it from a benefits point of view, here's, to your point, you're now able to cross the border fast. You're now able to get into the bar by just flashing your phone or scanning your phone or whatever implementation feature is used. And we start talking more about benefits that people can get. That is powerful and useful, and I think insightful, and might get us away from this digital identification backlash that gets sometimes wrapped up in the language. So that's helpful. Yeah. In my space, just one more thing I want to say on the BC services card, it just kind of, because I think it's really important to call out. One of the reasons I think that it's been very good as a program and has gotten better and better over the years is the thoughtfulness of design around allowing people to choose what information they are and aren't sharing with who they are and aren't sharing it, which I think is a really important implementation detail that helps us get away from, and it's on the features side of things, but the benefit is that we get away from some of that loss of privacy that is frequently talked about when we start talking about digital ID. So I think that's, you mentioned the opt-in nature of some of it and all that stuff. I think that's very important. In my world, the reason we're using the digital identity, the reason we're part of DIACC, the reason that all of this is really important is because we help run anti-money laundering programs, and ultimately identity is at the very core of a lot of AML efforts, or is certainly an important part of the AML efforts. But we tread very closely in that space against the big government thing. So as we get closer and closer to digital identity being widely available in whatever format that ends up taking on, help me paint the picture of how that's actually good for people in terms of privacy and what it's going to do for their ability for our ability as a society to prevent crime, but from everybody's ability to maintain their privacy at the same time. Can you kind of help me with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think, again, like a personal note here, I do think we always have to be honest about what the benefits our vision, the benefits that can be delivered, while recognizing, I feel like I've been knocking the internet as a tool for surveillance, but the internet wasn't created with an identity layer. I guess it was for IP addresses, but that's a very different thing. But so recognizing that there is an ecosystem of opportunities to be had and challenges to be solved, and they may not all solve each other at the same time, right? So like modernizing AML may not address the "is Instagram listening to me" kind of side of the ecosystem.
Sure.
Just want to be fair that those things may or may not snap together. But the in terms of like one example on privacy protection, I have a mail specialty pharmacy, and every year when it's tax season, they will. I will write to them and I will say, "It's tax season. Could you do me a printout of anything I paid on copays?" And And then they always write me back with an email that says, "For your privacy and protection, take a photo of your service card and email it to us." There are so many things wrong with that scenario that I just said. One is the statement "for your privacy protection." Take a picture of your government issued ID and email it to us. Those things just don't add up.
No, there's a
in
whole
any
lot
way
in there. Yeah,
a lot wrong in there, and also the theater element of, by taking a picture of a card and emailing it, in no way says that I actually emailed it, or proves it doesn't prove that it was me. It doesn't prove anything. It proves that there's a picture of this card and it's been sent from this email address, right? So there's kind of an element of theater, and I know as well that the people on the other side of that and the process on the other side of that have their own like tick box. Okay, we need to make sure that it's actually the patient, and we need to protect ourselves from liability that we gave the patient information out to someone who wasn't them. So we have to show that we did a thing. So there's, again, a lot of theater in there. And all the in protecting patient information, absolutely. But the things that come out of that, the steps that come out of that, don't actually do any of those things and don't actually solve any of those things. Now we have to be fair to this pharmacy. There are ways of solving this problem, knowing, is this the patient on the other side? Is this really them? But that said, these capabilities and these tools are getting adopted at different places out in the economy and out in the ecosystem. So it's kind of happening in adoption is happening in very different, with different rates of success and different rates of movement in different industries. So, but in terms of in an AML perspective as well, there is a particular Canadian province, and I won't say which one it is, but they do require that organizations that are registered to operate in this province, that officers and directors share their driver's license to the corporate registry as beneficial as directors. And this province also asked for these driver's licenses to be pictures of them to be emailed. So I'm not naming the pharmacy, I'm not naming the province. What I'm saying is there are tools out there. The tools need to be adopted. There's a lot of education to be done. There's a lot of opportunity to solve these issues and to pull out. You asked about protecting privacy. I think any ecosystem that's asking us to take pictures of driver's licenses and email them is not really protecting our privacy. It's trying to, but it's not in the end. Yeah. So in terms of something like AML, we also, to be clear, myself, DIACC, I think our members, I think we all envision a time when there are pervasively available options of digital credentials that are issued by governments or issued by institutions, authorities, and then people can use these credentials with options. I want to present this one or this one, and the organization who has the responsibility, the relying party or the verifier, would also say, I'll take this suite of credentials. You can pick two from here and give me those, right?
Mhm.
It's very similar to what we do in the paper world today when we have to go in and show a utility bill or show this or show that. We're starting to get there, but we're not fully there yet. So these tools eventually will have a lot more capabilities. But that said, there are fantastic. We collectively cannot expect a country, an economy, an ecosystem. We can't expect it to go from 1 to 5 in one hop. We have to kind of help with what does it look like to step through those pieces. And I'll tell you, like in the AML space and with collectives and advisory groups like the Financial Action Task Force, helping to align on helping the countries that recognize each other's AML to align on their AML regulations. There was a change. I forget which year, but there was a change relatively recently. The words that were in the regulations were that a person had to present the original documentation, and that word original was changed to authentic documentation. And by changing that word from original to authentic, creates a pathway to show that a digital representation of a document can be authentic, is authentic, versus I must pass you this paper or I must pass you this plastic, which is the original copy of that document or that identity card or something like that. So yeah, the way that we live today is very is not supporting privacy. There are tools that are out there that are helping to step along things like using photo ID capture, comparing it for known counterfeit signals, doing liveness checks that a person, their picture on the card matches who they are, loads and loads of technology underneath that hood. Combining that photo ID and liveness check with credit file polls and credit polls and signals from other areas around the economy. There are lots of different points of reference. There are many different points of reference and capabilities that are out in the ecosystem today and are becoming more and more available that can help our economy and help our ecosystem and our stakeholders step forward, from 1 to 2 to 3 until we get to 5 or whatever that ultimate, that we really do have digital tools that are trustworthy, that are guided by regulations and kind of all those things. But we're living that transformation right now. So this is why our collective of DIACC is so important as we're helping communities adopt. And we're seeing a lot of that adoption of these types of capabilities and clients and services in the legal sector, who are at the front line of where fraud is happening on signing contracts and verifiers of legal transactions. In the loan sector, issuing people loans for cars on dealership sites, and kind of anywhere where these high value transactions come into play. And this is using these tools as when people are remote, like not in the office, but it's also using these tools when people are in the office and comparing and validating these documents as well. So we're seeing a lot of, while Canada as an ecosystem continues to evolve to get where we collectively think we need to be, with DIACC, we're focused on both the vision as well as the how do we collectively and our members help the economy go step by step through this transformation. And AML is at the heart of that. So yeah.
No, that was great. I think to pick up on a couple of things you said. One, FATFA actually 2 or 3 months ago now, I'd have to go find the note. The other change that they're proposing is that one of the indicators of risk previously had been not physically meeting somebody, and they're now suggesting taking that out of the indicators of risk completely as they move towards this. Yeah, I saw that back in the spring as one of the recommendations coming out of the spring meetings, I believe. But to your point,
and this is a KYC podcast, but we didn't even get into B10 and third-party risk and all these kinds.
Nah,
There's so
that's
many
okay.
tools.
We only have so much time before we bore people. So the other thing that I think you said that was really important that I wanted to pick up on there was this idea that people emailing in photos or texting in photos of their ID, and how that's supposedly to prevent fraud and privacy and ensure privacy and all that kind of stuff, when in actual fact it truly does the exact opposite. But it feels safer somehow because it's what we're used to. We're used to this one little plastic card, and in somebody who's not thinking through how to create fraud's mind, that's authentic. And so why wouldn't I just email it to you? We're good. But if you look at it from a criminality point of view, it does introduce all sorts of problems, both because it is easy to fraudulently use it all of a sudden, and because now we're transmitting that information insecurely to without any sort of protection around who's going to receive it or see it on the other end. And that's before we get into the interception of that data. So I think what I heard you say, if I could summarize it, is that old school isn't necessarily secure and isn't necessarily respecting your privacy rights, and it just feels that way because we're somewhat used to it, I think is what I would want to echo back there.
Absolutely. And I do want to be ultra clear. I sent the picture. I have the pictures of the cards on my phone. So I went for the period on the end of the sentence. It's not like, and I didn't, or I had some. No, I did it because it was the only way to do what I needed to do. Right. So
yeah.
I'm also a client.
But you can see all the problems with it, and you're keenly aware of them. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's helpful.
Yeah.
I think this has been really helpful, and I've certainly feel like I've learned a bunch here, and I hope our audience will get something out of all of that. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about from a DIACC point of view that we didn't get to that you want to leave our audience with at all, or?
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, first thing that I want to say and share is that, in terms of the work of DIACC, in talking about a national approach, I'm pretty careful with that thought, even meaning that, Canada is a collection of provinces and territories and, individual sovereign governments working together. And so we're really, we work to be a connective layer, a way to share and amplify learning and information across these different jurisdictions, federal, provincial, territorial, municipal. And really, for DIACC, what's unique is that we were created out of the global financial crash of 2008, 2009. So we really came out as an organization that was looking at how do we make sure that Canada has the best participation in the global digital economy, and that our tools and our payments ecosystem is modernized. These things called digital identity or credentials or wallets, these are the tools by which to get to the vision. So we're really privileged and honored as a community to be the longest standing and the most diverse voice in Canada on this topic. And we're the only nonprofit forum that is specifically dedicated to digital trust and identity verification since 2012. So I'm extremely proud of the work that the members have done collectively and the work that we continue to do together to advance this space. Now, that said, I will also say that maybe kind of a little bit back to where we started. We collectively as an organization and individually as members of an organization are all working to secure Canada's economic future, our economic prosperity, our economic growth. And in a time where the global order is shifting, the geopolitical landscape is shifting, it's more important now than ever that we collectively leverage the capabilities of our ecosystem to support one Canadian economy, to support, pulling the millions and millions of dollars of fraud out of the housing market, to pulling the millions of dollars of fraud out of the lending market, to helping with new opportunities for small and medium businesses to get on board and grow, whether they're in Vancouver or Toronto, or whether they're deep in the interior or way up in the Yukon. we're really an organization that's focused on economic prosperity and growth. That's the message. And how do these digital tools for verification, how are they designed with security, privacy, and putting people at the center? And how do we working together to reduce reduce uncertainty and address challenges and risks? So if there's a takeaway, it's that we're really collectively focused on helping Canada with advancing in the economic space and the prosperity space. And I'm just so proud to work with this community. And I would invite any organization who wants to work with us or collaborate, please to reach out. We have lots of different ways of collaborating. And if you're like-minded and you want to help advance tools that are secure and privacy respecting for our economy and for the Canadian ecosystem and the global digital economy, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to see how we can work together.
That's awesome. No, that's great. I thank you for that. We became members because we really see the value of the work that DIACC's doing, and it interfaces quite directly with what we're doing. But I would echo your thoughts that the more people we have in the community, the better. And we've certainly found it to be welcoming, and I know that we would do the same for anybody else. So thank you so much for your time, Joni. I really appreciate being able to pick your brain today. I'm sure that we'll leave our listeners with something out of this. And thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, find us on LinkedIn. Let's continue the conversation. So nice to see you, Greg. Thanks for being an amazing member. And I would bet we'll probably see you on DIACC's podcast soon enough. So we'll
Sounds great. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Know Your Compliance podcast. If you'd like more information about our guests, have a story idea, or want to be a guest, please reach out to hello@kycpodcast.com. If you want to discuss your anti-money laundering compliance needs with a member of the Really Trusted team, go to www.reallytrusted.com/consult.